I'm Zev Brenner in conversation with Rabbi Yehoshua Balkany. You're listening to a special edition, and normally I spend the hour talking to Rabbi Yehoshua Balkany about some of the important issues of the day. But tonight we have a very special guest, Andrew Giuliani, running for governor of New York. So, Rabbi Balkany, you're going to be engaging in conversation with dialogue. I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the very important issues that affect all of us. So, Rabbi Balkany, take it away.
Good evening. Nice to have you, and thank you for your willingness to speak and to answer and clarify some issues that are very prominent to each and every New Yorker, not just the Jewish community. But before I do that, I would like very much if you would be willing to share with us some of your observations in your job at the White House working for President Trump. President Trump is a very, very popular name in our community, the Orthodox community. And you had the privilege to be with him almost every day in your capacity at the White House. Tell us about it.
Well, first off, Rabbi Balkany and Zev, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on with you. I actually just saw President Trump a couple of days ago at Mar-a-Lago for the premiere of the 2000 Mules movie, talking about some of the issues with the election a couple of years ago. And it's been a relationship I've had with him for almost 25 years now. And to be able to work 4 years for President Trump in the White House was an incredible experience. And honestly, I learned so much from him that he was able to change for this country that I want to do for the United States of America. I mean, when I look at regulatory reform as an example, one of the main reasons why in the beginning of 2020, U.S. unemployment was the lowest that it was since before man walked on the moon was because of the president's regulatory agenda. That's the same thing we need here in New York, at a place that's so overregulated, where government has become such a preeminent part of our lives. And we all saw this in 2020. It seemed like some of our government leaders thought that government was more important than our religion and our beliefs. That is the exact opposite of what a Giuliani administration would bring. But specifically, two things that I'm very proud of to have been at the White House for. I can't say that I played a direct role in this, but certainly some very good and very close friends did. First and foremost, obviously, the moving of the embassy I think was one of those moments that so many presidents had promised before. The president, when he did that in May of 2018, showed that this is a president who not only makes promises, but keeps his promises after he's elected. And then obviously the Abraham Accords was another incredible feat. I think for a while, the idea of peace in the Middle East almost became a punchline because everybody would talk about it without an actual plan. Well, we had a president and certainly an ambassador in David Friedman who actually were able to do this. And I remember sitting down with Ambassador Friedman in August of 2020. And I said, Ambassador, if we get 4 more years, how many more countries will sign on to the Abraham Accords? And he said, Andrew, I don't need 4 more years. I just need 1 more year. We had 1 more year, it'll be another dozen. So I'm hopeful that the progress that we saw under President Trump, not just in this country, but also for Israel and for the Middle East, and really for world peace, that progress we will be able to see commence again in 2025 when either President Trump or another conservative, or I should say another person who believes in Israel and the ideals of Israel, gets back in the White House and is able to push the message that I believe President Trump was able to push so effectively.
Beautiful. You know that this past week on Wednesday, there were 22 candidates nationwide who had primaries.
Yeah.
And the 22 were endorsed by President Trump. There were many more who were not endorsed by him, but the 22 that he endorsed, every one of them won.
He's got a pretty good record.
That is the loudest statement of the people that one could ever hear. because despite the liberal agenda and their claims that the will of the people, I think that demonstration of those 22 shows that the nation is not crazy, is not liberal, is not out of their minds. I mean, there are things with the issues of men and women and bathrooms in schools, teaching children things that were, no one even spoke about it in public, or today became something which we have to accept as part of the norm, which is really ridiculous. And President Trump, I think, no one ever said that every comment or statement he said was as articulate or as wise or as good to have expressed. He's a human being. But when we look, in every crowd I speak to that this comes up, I say, just look at the bottom line.
Yeah.
What did he do
for
the economy, for American prestige in the world, foreign policy, dealing with China, dealing with every item that he touched?
Yeah.
I mean, the gas prices were $1.49. Now they're $4.49. So I know that we're talking presidential and you're running for governor, not for president, but your close association, I feel, is worthy of underscoring for the public because of the fact that there is such a love, certainly in our community. And you see these 22 communities, most of them, they're not Jewish communities.
Yeah.
We're talking nationwide. But they're good Americans who love their country, respect their country, and want the best of their country. And when your father, around 8 years ago, made a statement that the New York Times jumped all over him, and it was, they claimed, the most unconscionable statement. How could he have said such a thing? When he said that he believed that Obama hated America. And the truth is, he hated America. He wanted to see every white person washing toilets. He wanted every person put that. It was really very bad. You know that on the Senate floor, which I gave around 40 times the opening prayer in Washington in the Senate, Obama, in the years that I was there were many more years before he got there that I was on the Senate floor, he refused to shake my hand. Now, I never had dealt with the man, never saw him, never discussed anything with him, but I was white and I was Jewish. That's a double strike by him.
Well, what I would say is simply this. Look, I think we've seen some real anti-Semitism that has infiltrated the Democratic Party recently, and it's really sad. It's something that we saw specifically in New York State with the pandemic and what they decided to do. I would say in 2020 was a full attack on our religion and our freedom to practice religion. Look, and I look at our current governor right now. In place of either a Star of David or a cross, she chooses to wear a vax necklace, where others would wear something signifying their closeness to God. That to me shows that she has a deity complex. And specifically, when you go into a church and you say, "I want you to be my apostles," you need a reality check. We'll put it that way. I look at this very simply. As governor, I take the perspective of I am running so that way the both of you and the 19.5 million New Yorkers, I would have the honor of you being my boss, not the other way around. We've had too many people in public service recently who think that they are crowned and that they are not accountable to the constituents that actually elect them. But you mentioned President Trump again and again. It was an incredible honor to serve him for 4 years as president. I think one of the most consequential presidencies, not just in my lifetime or our lifetimes, but in the history of this country. And when I think in and day out of how the media attacked him, my wife is from Lithuania originally, and the first couple of years of her life grew up under the Soviet Union. And this reminds me more of what I can imagine Pravda would be than actually a free press at this point in the United States, considering how, in many ways, they're just a shill for so much of the Democratic message instead of actually getting out there and reporting on the facts. That's really what we need again. And I would again point this out in Rudy Giuliani and in Donald Trump, my two mentors, two people that I have spent hundreds and thousands of hours with. I learned very simply that when you get elected on day one of election day through the last minute that you have the opportunity to serve, you don't answer to those consultants who are coming in and trying to get this meeting or get that meeting or get this special interest. You answer to, in my father's case, the 8 million New York City residents. In President Trump's case, the 340 million Americans. And in my case, it'll be the 19.5 million New Yorkers. And I can tell you every single day that will be on my mind. And I will ask simply of myself and my staff every single morning, what can we do today to make sure that New York is a safer place and a better place to live?
Yes. Yeah, I'm very happy that you have the last name that you have, because I gave many invocations for your father. Your father, when he was mayor 8 years, he came almost once a month to my house for either lunch or dinner. And I really respect him. And I always, before, during, and after, have proclaimed, in a sense, the distinguished role, the rare and remarkable position that he took as mayor. And he cleaned up this city. He made it a safe city, and he is one to be emulated, and he is one to be followed. And I'm happy that you say he's one of your two main mentors. Now, one of the key things that he did was he made New York a safer place. And a lot of people, I remember, this was 30 years ago, who many newspapers, oh, he's in dream world. He's talking about cleaning up the Fulton fish market. No one ever did it. Everyone promised it, but he did it. And he did it with dignity, and there were life threats against him and all sorts of everything, but he accomplished it. What is your view and vision for the state, especially the city that's in such a sad state of affairs that people are afraid literally to go on the subway to and from work, that they are being accosted? And Mayor Adams has tried a number of things to make it safer, but it doesn't seem to be working. It seems that there's a roadblock every corner that he turns, and there's more violence and more violence and more violence.
Yeah, what I would say first and foremost, we need to end the war on cops. We have all been told some fantastic lies over the last couple of years that the cops are part of the problem. When the truth is, we know that they're a central part of the solution in making New York the safest state in the country again. Look, we have seen crime go up so much, not just during this pandemic. And obviously, we've had so many people on the left point to the pandemic. I would point specifically to when bail reform, when cashless bail was signed into law 3 years ago. Crime has doubled in New York City since then. I was just in Rochester a few days ago too as well, Rabbi. And I have to tell you, last year they ended up reaching the most murders ever in recorded history in Rochester by October. And not only that, they're on pace to surpass that this year. Cashless bail has been a disaster all around New York State, not just in New York City. And the first thing that a governor can do is, and this is what I plan to do on day one, is sit down with the Speaker of the Assembly and the head of the State Senate and say, listen, this is my number one priority as governor. We have a budget negotiation coming up. If you don't repeal cashless bail, a full repeal, then I'm not funding your top priorities. It's that simple. And look, I know that Mayor Adams a couple of months ago went up to Albany to try to get a repeal or get some progress on that. Unfortunately, he was not able to get the progress that I think is necessary in this. Look, I think, honestly, he has some leverage right now because you got to remember, you have Kathy Hochul, who I likely will be running against come November 8th, but could be another Democrat. You have Kathy Hochul right now, who is still in the midst of a Democratic primary. And Eric Adams can very simply sit down with her and say, hey, look, I've got a $99.7 billion budget in New York City. I can endorse you or I can endorse another candidate. But the most important thing for me in considering my endorsement is who's going to keep my 8.5 New York City residents safe. If you do this and you repeal bail reform or you work on this, then I'll consider endorsing you. But if you don't, I'm going to look at your opponents long and hard. Obviously, I don't think Mayor Adams is looking at me right now for advice. But if I were to give him advice, that's the advice that I would give him. It's utilize your leverage. And don't consider politics in this decision, Mayor Adams. Make sure you go out there and consider the welfare of every single New Yorker, because that's the thing that matters most. That's the thing that I learned from Donald Trump. That's the thing that I learned from Rudy Giuliani. You know, sometimes you do what might not be the most politically attractive thing to do, but it's the best thing for New Yorkers, or it's the best thing for Americans. So that's what I would do on day one. Another thing that I would do on day one, and Rabbi, you touched on this a little bit. As you know, the governor actually has more board seats on the MTA than the mayor. That goes back to the Robert Moses days and the power struggles with Fiorello LaGuardia. If you want to read a great book, The Power Broker is a great book where you can really read about the history of all this. But Robert Moses was actually able to get the MTA control up into Albany because he controlled the governor at the time. Well, as governor, what I would do on day one is I would focus our efforts specifically on cleaning up the MTA. That includes the subways, that includes the Long Island Railroad, and includes the Metro North. Because I look at it this way. If I can pour my resources as governor into cleaning up the subways, and we can make sure that people have as safe and as clean of an experience as possible on their subway ride, and if they come up and above ground, they don't feel as safe or secure, that's going to put a whole lot of pressure on Mayor Adams to make sure that he follows through on his promises. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to have a mayor that's going to want to work with a governor who's actually shown results. So that for me is an action item on day one, 2 action items on day one that we will start working on January 1st, 2023. As you see, and I think everybody who listens to this, politicians like to talk, and you hear my answer. I like to talk as well, but more than liking to talk, I like action. And I'm a big believer in what are our action plans and how do we deliver.
Beautiful. You did mention the attitude to the police. I think it began in the Obama era with Eric Holder, the Attorney General at the time, bashing and trashing the police as if they were our enemies. Our students in my school were taught that when you pass on the street a police officer, that you turn to them and say, "Thank you, officer, for your service." And they are to be really held in very high esteem for putting their life on the line with a wife and children at home. They're not positive that they're going to make it home that evening. They hope they will, and we all pray and hope they will. But turning them into something less than a noteworthy, respected public servant, I think was unbelievable. I find that the attitude, what brought this bail problem, was stemmed from that. It became totally acceptable to bash the police. And I, in my dining room where I'm broadcasting from right now, where I'm speaking from, Mayor Adams sat here for lunch a few weeks ago, and I told him, that when you put back the $1 billion that Bill de Blasio took out from the police budget, that will show that your heart is in the right place.
Yeah.
You're not going to solve the problem with keeping everybody happy. There will be criticism from some segments if you put the money back, but do you want the security or do you want the popularity? And bottom line is that if the city continues to be so dangerous and such a problem, you're not going to have the popularity either. It's like the liberals were running around the United States. Oh, we haven't. The Republicans are saying they're taking over the Senate in Washington come the election in November, and they're taking over the House. Nonsense. You'll see the reaction. And I agree with the statement that you'll see, because Wednesday we saw what actually happened. 22 public servants or people running to become public servants won the day. And they were all endorsed by President Trump. So the attitude to the police has to change. Yeah. I suggested at a meeting of day school and yeshiva principals that every one of us bring into an assembly 2 or 3 of the local precinct policemen, honor them, give them a moment to say what their daily activity is, what they do to protect the city. Pick up the esteem and the dignity of each and every policeman, and that will go against the current. They made it popular to bash the police. When the thugs ran into Macy's and were breaking the glass windows and then carrying out $2,000 computers. So the police were told to stand down. And that very next day, Mayor de Blasio said, I must commend the police officers that there were no arrests made and they stood down while the disgusting looting and lawlessness, a city and a country cannot run without law and order. And you cannot make that the victim, the ones who are, that's the enemy, and have do whatever you want, the order of the day. So that was the example. I agree with you. I think every member of this, of New York City, every citizen, when your father was the mayor, he didn't accept. In other words, he was always willing to hear the other person. Yeah. And there were many who had different opinions, very different opinions. But he courteously listened to them. He allowed them to express themselves. And then he told them how he felt. And it would have been 108 diametrically opposed to whatever they were saying.
Well, Rabbi, the only thing I want to hop in there for a second and respectfully correct you on is you said Mayor de Blasio, and I think you meant former Mayor de Blasio. And the only reason I say that is because it sounds so good, former Mayor de Blasio, instead of Mayor de Blasio, because I think no matter what side of the political aisle we're on, no matter what our religious beliefs are, I think we can all agree that New York City is better with Mayor de Blasio as former Mayor de Blasio. But, you know, to that point and to your point there, I think you look at the progress that New York City saw from 1994 all the way through even the first couple of years of de Blasio when he had Bratton on there, and you still saw crime continue to go down those first few years before he got reelected. It went from over 2,200 murders a year in 1991 to less than 300, 289 at its lowest mark. Now, what you've had over the last 5 years is you've had literally the exact opposite approach. You have, instead of actually empowering our police and allowing them to proactively police, we now have a mayor, or had a mayor, that looks and says, you know what, I want to make sure you don't make any arrests, even if there are misdemeanors or felonies going on. One of the things that I've pledged to do on day one, and the Article 2, Section 1 of the New York State Constitution gives the governor this authority, is fire Alvin Bragg or any other district attorney, any of the 62 district attorneys around New York State that violate their oath of office. I believe it's very clear. Alvin Bragg violated his oath of office when he wrote to his assistant district attorneys that he was going to reclassify entire categories of crime, including not prosecuting resisting arrest or armed robbery. What does that tell us to our cops? What does that tell to these people who are actually thinking about potentially fighting back against our cops when they're doing their job and trying to do the right thing and clean up our streets? So to me, I think it's going to be very clear. Our cops are not going to have a stronger ally in the governor's chambers than an Andrew Giuliani. And I can promise you that. And my number one advisor on that is Rudolph Giuliani. And again, look at those numbers from 2,200 murders a year to less than 300 murders a year. There's nobody since Henry Hudson came down that Hudson River that had a more effect on keeping New Yorkers safe than Rudy Giuliani.
Agreed. Absolutely. Talking for just a moment about our schools and our children. The agenda set by the liberals opens the doors with no limitation to decency, to modesty, to proper attitudes and behavior. If someone is gay and he wants to do whatever he's doing, this is America. We don't force anyone into one mode, regardless of our religious beliefs, and we may be absolutely against certain things. But to try to make it the run of the day, the actual atmosphere in schools for 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, it's unbelievable.
It's terrible. Rabbi, I'm a new father myself of 5 months now. And I, with the leftist media, I don't even call them liberal because they're not liberal anymore. It's not liberal thought. It's not free thought. But with the leftist media, maybe I'd call them the Pravda media at this point. I got in trouble because I simply said, look, I'm a father that, makes sure I spend time with my daughter. I've changed her diapers. I know that she's a girl and she's going to stay a girl. So one of the leftist rags called me up and asked if I stand by those comments. And I facetiously said, well, I'm not a biologist, but I do know the difference between a man and a woman. Of course, referencing the soon-to-be Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown, who, when they asked, what is a woman? She said, I'm not a biologist. And I've stood by those comments because, honestly, if we cannot agree that there are two genders and we cannot agree that, that we're going to stand by our kids and allow them the right to freely be able to figure this out on their own without actually having to put this in front of them at 6, 7, 8 years old, we're hypersexualizing them. And this is not just, by the way, in terms of homosexuality. There's also heterosexuality. I don't want my daughter at 6 or 7 years old learning about sex at that age. That's just wrong. It's something that is perverted, to be perfectly honest. And look, to your point, Rabbi, and as governor, I'm a big believer, and my father said very simply, I want the government to stay out of my wallet, and I want them to stay out of my bedroom. I would add, I want them to stay out of my synagogue or my church as well. The truth is, if somebody at 18 years old, if they choose to snip off this part or to add this part, I don't think the government should be involved in this. We should not fund it. That's certainly something we shouldn't do, but that's their right as an American. But what I will tell you is, at 17 years old and 364 days or younger, if you want to start pushing the idea of hormone therapy to my daughter or any kids, I consider that child abuse, very simply. And I'm going to push back on that with every part of my being, not just as a gubernatorial candidate, not just as a future governor, but as a father who Look, when I held my baby daughter on that first day, I knew the most important thing in my life was her welfare and making sure that she was safe. I know the frustration that every parent must have felt over the last couple of years as they've seen their curriculums and they've seen the perversion that we've been taught. But, as we're on the point of education, let me just tell you a little bit more of what I would like to do specifically as governor. I'm a big believer in a tax voucher program. So that way, if we do have schools, public schools specifically, that are teaching some of these perverted ideas to our kids, that parents then that way, because of their high property tax dollars, actually have the voucher. So that way they can send their kids to yeshiva school, or they could send them, if they're Catholic, to a parochial school or to a private school or homeschool. We need to make sure there are more options, more choice in education. It's very similar to introducing the free market into an economy. It works because there's more choice, there's more competition. And what it does is it creates accountability and creates performance standards. That to me as governor is going to be key. I also look at the importance of making sure that we up the cap of charter schools. Right now, the charter school cap in New York City is 270, and at New York State, it's at 460. I want to make sure we push that cap in New York City above 600 by the end of my first term, and that cap in New York State above 1,000 by the end of my first term. Because, look, it shouldn't just be kids like myself who had the parents who had the means to be able to send me to a parochial school who have the opportunity to have a great education. It should be every single New York school child that has that opportunity. And that's how we're able to do it, by more charter schools and more school choice and a tax voucher program that will create competition in our education system.
Beautiful. Your father deserved a lot of credit, deserves. I remember when he became mayor, one of my first conversations with him was the voucher idea. And there were some limited vouchers that existed at that time. And he asked me, like, what do you want to do? I said, well, look, anyone who is white and put in an application basically has been turned down. 97% of the vouchers went to the Black and Hispanic communities. Now, I'm not saying that someone who's Black or someone who's Hispanic shouldn't, if they're entitled to have the voucher, get it. But why eliminate just because some of those who were heading that agency and distributing it really in the Black? So when I brought it up to your father said it's a public program. How in the world could that be? How could that be? It's impossible. So I went back 3 weeks later and he said, we checked it out. And indeed, we put a pin where every voucher exists in the 5 boroughs. And it's around 98%, wow, not 97%. And he gave me 4,000 vouchers at the time. It was like a $200 million worth of vouchers. I distributed it to 28 yeshivas. They didn't jump the line. These were people who were waiting already years with applications in, perfectly qualified. And I remember the Daily News put me on the front cover and beat me up for having delivered. And
that's how you knew you were doing a good job, when the Daily News beat you up. That's how you knew you were doing your job.
Your father answered and said, that article, they should hire the rabbi as a consultant. It just shows how successful he was. And there were communities that didn't have a voucher, a single voucher, got some fair share. And I encourage the Irish and Italian communities to follow suit. Some of my friends there, because their communities also were being disavowed from participating or never getting a response. They gave them the applications and they never heard from the city. So your father really blazed the trail. And when you say as governor that you would really want to institute and see to it that that is developed and built upon, it'll make a big, big difference. Choice always, that's the capitalistic democratic way of growth, competition, healthy competition, and that always hires the standard of where we are. I want to say that a few weeks ago, when I met you for the first time at lunch, when we had the lunch, which I thank you very much for taking out from your very busy schedule, the time to meet. I mean, I had met you when you were running around City Hall 30 years ago as a little boy. But
I was a little pain in the you know what, Rabbi, then, and you can ask the Democrats. I think I'm a little bigger pain in the you know what now. So
yeah. No, but I was very impressed with our meeting. You're articulate. You are honest. There's a sincerity that comes through. And I want for anyone listening to this broadcast in the Republican primary, please vote for Giuliani.
thank you, Rabbi.
I know that there's two others, basically, or three others who are running in that primary, but we have to set our sights, as you said before, to the issues. Let's push politics aside and let's push friendships aside. Who will be the most effective bottom line advocate for the people and the children of this state?
Well,
so I think that the choice would be very wise. I remember when his father was running and he came to see me, and I thought that it was a little bit premature because he was really having an uphill battle. And I said, look, if you wait 4 years, you're going to see you'll win. And that's what happened. He was running, and then he decided that he was going to wait the 4 years. And he became, in my opinion, the most effective mayor that we ever had. And this has been Andrew's role model, not because it's his father, but the fact that it is his father. He's right up front, talks to him every day, sees him often, and now he has been blessed, with a child, his wife and his child, may they be well, has that sensitivity to youth, to children, and his agenda for the state, starting with the security and the honor and dignity of the police force, will follow through. I feel very confident that he will live up, as the president lived up to what he said. Moving the embassy, we existed as a state of Israel with the embassy in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem. But once it was an issue and everyone kept saying they're doing it, it was not right not to do it. Why did you say it? Just in an election to get elected, or to find favor with a segment of people that you're dealing with? You want to have them vote for you? But President Trump did it and actually kept his word on, I think, every issue of major concern. And the people who did not vote for him, I can't, like the people who took away the bail reform.
Yeah.
What type of legislator, what type of person did such a thing that an intelligent high school student could have predicted the mayhem and the difficulty and all of the trouble that has come about? You take a person that's been 3 times in jail and come out of jail and then be told when they do a 4th offense, well, you can go back to the street. As former Mayor Bill de Blasio complimenting police, watching the lawlessness of carrying out merchandise in the hundreds, and not one was arrested, and he complimented the police. Thank you for your patience, your understanding, and that you stood down. So our interview really is coming to an end. I just want to thank you very sincerely.
Thank you,
for
Rabbi.
the time that you have allotted. Again, I encourage, and anyone who wants to call me, when your father ran for mayor, I had 75 rabbis come to the auditorium of my school, and these were just the title rabbi. I took rabbis of large congregations from all 5 boroughs that came, and I had 15 rabbis from Brooklyn, from Queens, from Staten Island, and they attended a luncheon, and it was an atmosphere that was really not so simple because he was a very aggressive prosecutor before, and there was some bad feeling out there. So, and it was a lunch for like 3 hours. I didn't allow any press in. They wanted to come. It was a private event, and it allowed every rabbi to express himself, and it allowed your father to express himself in response and to say the comments. And many of the rabbis, years later, 2 years later, 4 years later, 10 years later, thanked me again for that meeting. He said, that broke the ice for us in our own minds and our comfort level to be able to do what we had to do with our congregations and our communities. But it gave us a true comfort level. And look what the man did for the city.
Well,
and we hope for the state, you as governor will do the same.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. First and foremost, just to comment on a couple of things you said there. When you mentioned what you were able to do regarding the 97 and actually 98% of the vouchers, I mean, thinking back, that actually really is the exact opposite of what Dr. King had pledged when he said, I want people to be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin or the basis of their religion. And so, I think that's so important. I think on the left, they've lost that for some reason. And you're right, there's been a vilification of, for whatever reason, Zionism and also in some ways kind of the traditional American family also. And that's something that I think we need to fight back against. Obviously, we're always looking for real progress in America, not some of the perverted progressive ideas, but real progress. And I agree with some of the pushes in there to make sure that we are doing that. And we are looking and we're saying, how can we get better? But we don't have to ask, how can we get better with the underlying assumption that America is irredeemable, because I completely disagree with that. I think there's a reason why you have so many people that bled for that flag and died for that flag that's behind me, including my wife, who decided to leave her country and come to the United States of America. She's as great of an example of the American dream as there is that anybody that I know. So that's on one thing. The other thing I wanted to say too is, my father, one of the things that he talks about as one of the, I don't want to say highlights to his mayoralty, but one of the most consequential things in his mayoralty was at the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, when Yasser Arafat actually ended up taking a ticket, was not given a ticket, but taking a ticket to the Metropolitan Opera. My father found out about it before the show. And even though the Clinton administration said, no, let him be there, he said, nope, we're getting that murderer out of my city right now. This is my event, and we're getting him out of there. Now, the New York Times, they said that he did something that was terrible, that for decades, America would be set back because of this, because of the peace process. My father, still to this day, that's one of the most proud moments of his life, because he stood up against a bully, and he said, not in my city, ladies and gentlemen. That's
Beautiful.
What I'll do as governor and of this state.
And I called him the next day after that happened. Rudy, we love you and we are proud of you.
No.
And that's what I said to him. So you were very articulate, and you make an excellent impression. You are very dynamic, and your message comes across very well. And I encourage, however, how many are listening, to remember the eloquence, the articulation, and the expression of honesty and sincerity when you make that vote in the Republican gubernatorial primary.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you for being with us.
Rabbi, thank you very much for your endorsement. It means the world to me. I can't thank you enough. And Zev, thank you very much for your generosity in turning over the show to us for 45 minutes or an hour, whatever it's been at this point. We really appreciate it. And again, Rabbi, thank you very much. It means the world to me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great job, gentlemen. Wonderful job, and look forward to a continuous conversation. And you've been listening to Conversations with Rabbi Yehoshua Balkany. I'm Zev Brenner, and usually I'm in conversation with Rabbi Balkany, but Andrew did a great job. They didn't need me, so wonderful show. Thank you for being on the show tonight. Thank everybody for listening to Conversations.
Oh, this is my phone.
Great job. Thank you so much.
Well, Zev, again, thank you very much. Rabbi, I can't thank you enough. It really means the world to me. You're a good man. You're a very good man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a restful Shabbos, guys.